Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Study Sessions. We are now Year 11 on week 3 of our homework booklet, our exam preparation booklet, and we are continuing with descriptive writing. So, the purpose of this podcast and video is really to help you not just plan and write, but actually get to the planning stage. We're going to spend quite a bit of time in today's video and podcast thinking about how do we go from just looking at the stimulus image to actually turning that into a fully fledged plan, and then how do we go from the plan into the individual sentences and, of course, our AQA descriptive cycle that we're going to be using time and time again to allow us to create variety and interest in the descriptions that we produce. So we're on week 3. Make sure we're on the right section of our exam preparation booklet. Just a couple of reminders, and I'm going to go through these in a little bit more detail, but just some quick reminders of some golden rules when it comes to descriptive writing. The first one is that we're writing in third person, not first person. So we're not writing from our own individual perspective. We're not writing something like I gripped the seat. It will be something in third person like the passenger or he or she gripped the seat. We're also going to need to be very careful about our sentences. And one of the things I've included in this episode of Study Sessions are sentence scaffolds for every single paragraph and indeed every single sentence that you will need to be writing over the course of your homework description. One of the issues that we've noticed as teachers is a tendency among some students to accidentally write fragments, that is, minor sentences or sentences that aren't complete. Quite often, what happens is students include present participles, often words ending in ing in English, but they forget auxiliary verbs. They forget what we might also call a helper verb. More on that in a moment. It is something we need to avoid. Every sentence needs a subject and a verb to be considered grammatically complete. And then finally, we want to be writing in the past tense. We want to keep our writing in the past tense throughout. Otherwise, there can be a tendency to engage in random shifts in tense, and it becomes very difficult for the reader to follow the sequence and the chronology of our description. So, just a quick word on those sentence fragments. Some of us are writing things like the sun shining down upon the sea, which can feel descriptive. Okay, we're describing what the sun is up to, but we can't use shining on its own. We can think of it as being perhaps not strong enough to carry the full sentence, so we need was in there. The sun was shining down upon the sea. Think, as I mentioned on the slide, okay, you never say something out loud, a sentence like the man walking down the street. It feels incomplete. Instead, we would say in English, the man was walking down the street. Take care with whether the subject is plural or singular. Clearly, we also wouldn't write the men was walking down the street. If the subject is plural, then the verb needs to match. It needs to be shifted to were. The men were walking down the street. Now, that's one of the issues that we've noticed cropping up in your homework, so something to bear in mind. Quick tip would be when you are proofreading, checking over your work, identify wherever you've used a present participle. Often they'll end in English in ing. Highlight them or just draw your attention, focus your attention on them, and then think, all right, have I missed was or were out here? Because the chances are, if you have, then there's something that's gone wrong. So, we're talking about generating ideas now. All right. And this can be very, very challenging. I think sometimes as teachers, we can assume we can go sort of straight from the image into, oh, right, there's a plan. But actually, there's quite a leap of thought and thinking required to go from looking at the image to then turning that into a plan. And so, what I want to do in this video and podcast episode is kind of break that down, like I did in the previous episode, into a series of steps or stages. And I'm going to narrate what's going on in my brain as I am looking at the image. Because when I say look at the image, I don't just mean I'm kind of just gazing at it. I'm not just looking at it, I'm asking questions of it. And then there are things going on in my mind that I'm going to be using to help me actually then sequence and plan my ideas. So I have got a fully fledged plan at the end of this. It's obviously going to create a really controlled and well-structured piece of descriptive writing. So it says here, use your senses and imagination to bring the journey to life. We want to take the reader on a journey. It was a bit easier in the previous homework because by journey we meant a train journey. Here, though, perhaps the notion or idea of a journey isn't so immediately obvious to us. So I'm going to talk you through about how we can get that sense of movement, journey-like progression in an image that feels more static than the image of a train moving, which obviously lends itself more obviously to a journey. So there are 4 stages, there are 4 steps, and as we become more practiced in these steps and stages, they'll be quicker. We'll move through them really, really quickly. I would say now, when I'm doing this, obviously as someone who understands his subject in detail, I would do the observe and the associate or association stage. I would do that kind of almost together, almost simultaneously. I'm going to break them down a bit more methodically for this video and for this episode, because obviously I want you to understand sort of how I'm getting to the sorts of ideas and associations I am generating. So let's have a look. We've got this image here, and it's in your exam preparation booklet as well. So what I'm doing, the first thing I'm doing is I'm observing. I'm looking at the image. I'm thinking about what can I see. So let's just have a quick look at the image. Okay, we're thinking what is literally there in the image. So we've got really a very narrow street. I've described it as canyon-like. Okay, a narrow canyon-like street lined with these tall buildings on either side. So it feels kind of closed in. We've got almost every balcony, and we can see there are loads and loads of balconies in this image. It's sort of packed with bodies, and most people, with the odd exception, they seem to be wearing white clothing with the occasional flash of red. We can also see hanging from at least some of the balconies, banners and flags. We can see obviously railings on the edge of the balcony to make it safe. And we can see people leaning over. They're leaning over and it looks like their gaze is angled down. And some people waving their arms around as well. And then if we look at the bottom of the image, just at the very bottom, you can just about make it out, we can see a stream of people flooding through the street below. So that's literally what I can see. Now, the tendency is to start, particularly as a teacher, is to start immediately going to the associate process. We're going to do that now. We start with just going, what can I see? And now, okay, we start making some associations. That is, what do these details, the narrow canyon-like street, the balconies packed with people, the banners and the flags, what do these details actually suggest? Okay, what ideas do I associate with them? So I'm looking at all of the white and the red. I'm thinking of tradition, people wearing the same kind of clothing, right? So there might be some kind of tradition going on. It's obviously part of their identity. Is it something to do with their local identity? The flashes of red, we maybe be thinking of things like danger or blood. Seems a little bit more unsettling, maybe. Then we're looking at the overcrowded balconies, and I'd associate both the balconies, the way people are craning over, even sort of looks like they're putting themselves in danger, that sense of anticipation, that sense of community, but it's all very tightly packed. So we might also associate it with feelings of being fenced in, the feeling of claustrophobia. We've also just got loads of people together, gathered in one location in what looks like a really interesting, rather unusual way. So when we've got people gathered together, we might start thinking of ideas around community, togetherness, unity, that sense of a shared identity. They're all together sharing in this moment. That's reinforced as well by the fact that so many of them were wearing very similar items of clothing. Then we've also got the narrow street. So the narrowness of the street with the audience kind of peering over reminds me a little bit of something like a theatre, and the buildings themselves and the people on the balconies of the buildings forming an audience of observers. And then finally, and really importantly, the parade below. What do I know about parades? Well, I know that they can be full of noise and music and rhythm and ritual and spectacle. These are all of the things I'm thinking of. I know that people have religious parades. I know that people have community parades. I know that people have parades for, say, a successful football team. You know, they've won a cup, they've won the league. They have a big kind of victory parade for some for some celebration. Okay, those are all of the things that I'm bringing to mind now. And now what I want to do is I want to sequence it in time order, sequence it chronologically. Okay, so I'm going to start, if we're thinking of almost filming this, I'm going to start with that wide view of the whole street, maybe even like from above, kind of describing the neighborhood and the street in its entirety. And then, if we're continuing with the camera analogy, the next section of our description is going to focus in on those balconies and the people above the street. Okay, so you can imagine we're kind of zooming in, we're focusing in, and now we're dropping down to street level. So we've gone wide view, then into the balconies and focusing in on the people looking down. Then we've moved and dropped down again to the street level, and we've actually got the parade. So lots of opportunity for kind of auditory description. And then what I want is that the parade has gone past, and now there's a sort of strange sense of stillness. Yes, there are people still on the balconies, but with the passing of the parade, there's a kind of hush, a stillness, because the parade has now moved on. So there's my four kind of paragraph, four sets of foci, things to focus on that I want for my description. And then we can sometimes forget about this, which is tone. What do we want the tone to be? That is, do I want my piece of writing to feel joyous? Do I want to emphasize the laughter, the music, the color, the celebration, the joy, the sense of entertainment, the sense of community? Do I, though, want to actually shift the tone? Do I want to produce something a little bit more unsettling? Okay, if we're talking about going back to the associate phase or section of our kind of thinking, we've talked about claustrophobia, all those people tightly packed in. Do we actually want to focus on feelings of being overwhelmed? That this might be quite a sort of overwhelming experience from a sensory point of view. It's going to be crowded. It might feel relentless. The noises might be kind of deafening, intense. I'm thinking now of words like cacophony or cacophonous. And do we want it to be unsettling? Do we really want to lean into that aspect of our tone and our description? Do we want a feeling of like there's too many eyes, the sense of kind of like nervous expectation, tension? Is there perhaps this kind of ominous threat lurking of people falling out, that things might get out of hand? Okay, maybe. It's up to you. It's your description. Okay, but you obviously need to decide what your tone will be. Now, for me, I've generally gone with a more kind of like joyful tone, but I do want a bit of a sense of at times of being kind of overwhelmed by noise, by possibly even a little bit by expectation. And that's all of these things that I want to achieve tonally are going to feed into my word choices, the particular images and words that I'm going to be using. So here is an example, it's just an example of a 4-paragraph plan. And what I will do is I'll move my head slightly out of the way. There we go. So you can see this properly. So as I've said, we start with a wide view of the street. Those first impressions of the narrow street, canyon-like, crowded buildings, the sense of anticipation. Then we zoom in, the balconies and people. Faces kind of like leaning out, people leaning out, flags waving, bodies pressed together on the balcony, the sense of excitement, the sense of noise building up. Then we go down to the street level. We've got the surge of movement, the noise, the drumming, the shouting, the cheering, the laughter, the color, the sound of people's feet. All of that music and noise and rhythm fills the street. It's going to be really, really auditory, that section of my description. And then finally, in contrast, we're going to end with the quiet hush afterwards. The parade disappearing round the corner, the sense of bits of paper, the confetti and ribbons and so on, okay, drifting around in the breeze. The sound of the parade now distant, remote, okay, indistinct, and a calm, reflective silence as people start to take in that the parade has passed by and that maybe the celebrations and what the parade represents is over for another year. Okay, so there's my 4-paragraph plan. It is just a set of ideas. You do not need to be, you don't have to stick to this. This is just to help you with your thinking and your planning. But you can deviate from this. This is your description. I'm just giving you a general structure to follow. Okay, so let's go back to here, and I'll just increase the size of my head. There we are. Right, so what we've got now is the actual writing cycle itself. All of this has been planning up to this point. Now we're back to the descriptive cycle. And this is a cycle that repeats paragraph by paragraph. So the cycle is inform, we set the scene. We need to just tell the reader where, when, who, what's going on, where are we? We need to, as it says there, anchor the reader, kind of situate the reader in a sense of place and time and location. Then describe. We're focusing in on sensory detail. Now, it says here, use sight, sound, smell, touch, and movement. Okay? The more sensory the description, the more vivid and engaging the piece of writing. This description, because we've got a parade and a sense of celebration, links itself really well to a sensory description that focuses on what can be heard, sound, okay? Auditory imagery, we might say. Then reflect. We're thinking, what does that detail suggest? Why does it matter? We want a sense of like internal psychological reflection, okay? Then react. So we've gone external world in the inform and describe. Reflect, we're thinking about kind of psychological reflection, things like symbolism, reflecting on the atmosphere, the mood of anticipation, the mood of excitement. Then react. How do people respond physically and emotionally? Okay, particularly, I want us to focus here on body language and physical reactions to feelings. That is showing, not telling. And then connect, linking forward or outward. So we need to connect from paragraph to paragraph the next moment, a big, wider idea, and particularly at the end, that sense of a sequence unfolding and concluding. What we don't want is each paragraph to end either kind of flatly, like, oh, right, it's kind of done, but also that sense that each paragraph is its own little weird, disconnected island, and that each paragraph is just this sort of standalone thing. We want the final sentence, the connect sentence, to connect to the next paragraph. Now, what you can see here, and I'm going to go through all of these, are sentence scaffolds for each of the paragraphs following my plan that I've just shown you. So, inform, describe, reflect, react, connect. Now, you can see these in the video. I'll be sharing them in the podcast as a handout. I'll be sharing this set of slides as a handout as well, so that you can follow along, pause the video or pause the podcast, and then you can obviously be using them as you are working through your piece of writing. Remember, scaffolds aren't cheating. We're asking you to do something really ambitious here, really imaginative, and actually we can be most creative when there is a bit of restriction. If I just said, right, there you go, there's a picture, there's some line paper, off you go, I'll give you 45 minutes, see you in 45 minutes, people find that really overwhelming. It's much easier to be creative, but within a set of constraints or boundaries, and that's what the sentence scaffolds give us. So, wide overall view, informed sentence. At the heart of the town, a canyon-like street, okay? You finish it off. The describe. So now we're zooming in. Balconies jutted out like ledges of rock, every rail. See if you can have some kind of sound going on there. Reflect. From above, the scene might have seemed, again, thinking about like looking at it, what might it look like? We're thinking of the kind of the roads and the streets weaving their way narrowly through the town or the city. We've gone with town here. We're thinking river tributaries. We're thinking like veins, capillaries, arteries, those sorts of words and kind of images. Metaphorically, we often associate, streets with like arteries running through a body, or veins or capillaries running through a body, okay, or tributaries running off from a main central river. And then react. Heads tilted back and eyes blinked. This idea that people are kind of taking in the scene. Connect, it felt like the beginning. The beginning of what? I want this sense of kind of like build, sense of anticipation, sense of excitement, this sense of maybe the kind of like swelling of an ocean, okay, as the wave is about to drift and kind of crash or move towards the coastline, something like that, okay? Now we've gone from that wide view. Now we're really resolutely focused on those balconies and the people above. So in form, the balconies lean forward. Okay, I'd like even this kind of like the metal to be sort of like bending, creaking as people are pushing on the balcony. They're so eager and kind of full of anticipation. Describe, children dangled red flags, women clapped, an old man. Okay, we're giving that kind of like focus on like individual little moments. Reflect, the closeness of so many people made. Okay, this is where we can maybe possibly focus on the sense of claustrophobia, the sense of maybe being somewhat overwhelmed by just the sheer physical proximity of so many people. A boy grinned. Okay, react. A boy grinned, and then maybe add something like it being like so overwhelming that maybe a boy might grin and then it fades from his face as he begins to feel like this is too much, covers his eyes, covers his ears, something like that. In the distance, the growing sound of. This is the growing sound of the parade. That sense that we're connecting the balconies of people waiting to now the next paragraph, which will be the parade itself. And here we are. Paragraph 3, we're now down to street level. In form, beneath the balconies, we're telling us now we're on the street level. The parade suddenly appeared. Okay? The parade suddenly turns up. It comes around the corner. The parade suddenly appears. Wow. Okay? Big moment. Drums pounded rhythmically. Feet. Okay? Describing the kind of the sounds, the cacophony, the din of the parade, the noise of the music. Okay? And so on. The noise became okay, that's where we can either have something positive if we're going for the kind of celebratory, joyful, joyous tone, or we can have that kind of more overwhelming approach. The words we choose for this one will really determine the sort of tone that we produce. A small child covered their ears, so we can have that sense that this is like really deafening. And then finally, connect. The energy rushed past as if. Again, think about that sense of like rushing past movement. And then our final paragraph. After the parade, the quiet hush. Then, as the crowd rounded the corner, they're gone. The air hung heavy with what? The hush that followed seemed. Everything now has been, previous paragraph, it was kind of like up here. It's like intense, loud. Now we're sort of like allowing the reader to take a breath. Okay, pause. The parade has passed. The moment of anticipation and excitement has reached its culmination. And now, if we think it like a graph, it's kind of built up to this peak and now it's dropping back down. People stood motionless. They're taking it in. They've seen the parade. They've had this moment, the moment they've been so excited for. Is it a sense of satisfaction, or maybe it's up to you? Is there a feeling of disbelief, anticlimax, all this build up, and then it's passed by so quickly? And then the final connect sentence. We've got some fragments here, one word sentences. This is done on purpose, it's not an accident. Celebration, community, togetherness, the culmination of what? Months of work and preparation passed by in that brief moment as people's minds turn to the next parade and next year, looking towards a future, something like that. Okay. So that's the sequence. That's what we're doing. Final checklist. When you've written your description, we don't just go, right, job done. That's all out of the way. I can have a little chill now. We want to make sure that we've checked that we've been successful. So, have we, ask yourself this, and I would always read this out loud. Much easier to hear errors when you read something out loud. Ask yourself this. Have I written in third person? Are all my sentences complete? Have I been consistent in my use of the past tense? Have I used the full writing cycle? Remember, it's inform, describe, reflect, react, connect. Have I ended each paragraph crucially with a connect sentence that connects my paragraph to the big kind of theme of celebration and the key ideas that I'm exploring, but also does it connect from one paragraph to another? Check your work using the list that I've just run through. And if you've achieved all those things, I'm sure you will have done a really, really good job. So, as always, thank you so much for watching this video, or indeed, if you are listening to this as a podcast, for listening to this podcast, please make sure, if you're watching this on YouTube, that you like and you subscribe. Make sure that you also hit that notification bell so that every single week when I release a new video, you get notified so you can watch it. It's going to help you massively with your homework. And also, please make sure you have subscribed to the podcast as well. And also, if you can write a review for the podcast, that would be great. It'd be hugely appreciated. You can, of course, also see me out on the yard Monday to Friday. Come up and tell me all about the podcast, how much it's helped you. But also, I am open to constructive criticism. So if there's things that you would like or things maybe that I've not been very clear about and you want more help with, please just come and ask me and I'll do my best to take it on board. All right. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And I'll see you next week.